Avodah is joy. Avodah should come from a place of joy in our hearts. Okay, now, without flipping pages, just scan your eyes back to the very top of the page. The text that you have at the top of the page is a Mishnah. What is a Mishnah? Let me just briefly place us in context here. We have the Torah and the Bible. The Torah is part of the Tanakh, the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, the three major pieces of the Hebrew Bible. The Torah is the 5 books of Moses, Nevi'im are the works of the prophets, Ketuvim, the sacred writings. The book of Psalms is in the sacred writings. The Megillot that we read on special holidays like Esther and Ruth and Song of Songs, those are in Ketuvim as well. Those comprise the Hebrew Bible. As we move on in history, the Bible was canonized in the 2nd century BCE, around the time of the Maccabees. The book of Daniel is roughly contemporaneous with the book of Maccabees. The book of Daniel makes it into the canon of the Hebrew Bible. The book of Maccabees, for a variety of reasons, does not make it into the Hebrew Bible, but they're written at about the same time. So the nascent rabbinic authorities of the time close off the Bible. And at the same time, there's a development of what it comes to be known as the oral tradition, the oral Torah. There's Torah shebichtav, the written Torah that we have in the form of the book, the Hebrew Bible. And then we see this development of the oral Torah, oral traditions that come to interpret the Torah more extensively. In some cases, this was necessary because in some cases we look at the Torah and we're not really sure how to live as Jews, and the oral tradition comes to fill in the gaps. Like we know from the Torah we have various dietary restrictions, but it doesn't tell us how to shecht a cow or how to keep kosher in the way we now know how to keep kosher. It doesn't tell us the specific prayers that we have. It doesn't tell us too many details about how to observe Shabbat. It tells us not to work on Shabbat, but the rabbis draw from an oral tradition that they say goes all the way back to Moses at Sinai, saying that these are the specific forms of work, of labor, that we're not supposed to do on Shabbat. And so the oral tradition fills that in. So for a few centuries, it was strictly an oral tradition. But then calamity strikes. The Romans destroy the Second Temple in the year 70 of the Common Era. And then a second, perhaps even greater calamity comes about 60 years later with the Bar Kokhba revolt. Bar Kokhba he saw himself as a messianic type leader who was going to revitalize the Jewish Commonwealth and rebuild the temple. His revolt that he started ends in complete disaster for the Jewish people. And the Romans come in, they plunder Jerusalem, they forbid Jews from ever living in Jerusalem, and this happens around the year 135. So the Jewish community in the land of Israel is decimated. So it's at this time that these oral traditions that are out there, the rabbis take them and they start to write them down, make sure that they're recorded for posterity. So we have around the year 200, the leader of the Jewish community of the land of Israel, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Judah the prince, takes this collection of oral tradition called the Mishnah, and it's arranged in topical order. So like you have a section on Shabbat, you have a section on blessings, you have a section called Psachim, which is all about Passover. It's arranged differently from the Torah, which is, you have laws all over the place. This is the first ordered compilation of Jewish law. It's a codex. And Yehuda HaNasi takes this and edits it, and it's the first collection of the oral law that becomes written down. And it's the template for the Talmud that is to develop over the next few centuries. In the Mishnah, there is, in addition to all of the laws, there is a section of ethical teachings called Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is the bridge between all the laws we see in the Mishnah, the laws that talk about what it means to observe Shabbat, what it means to observe Pesach, Passover. Takes all of these laws and links it to Moses at Mount Sinai. And the very first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot talks about the transmission from Moses to Joshua to the elders, to the prophets, to the men of the great assembly. And this is interpreted as the proto-rabbis. In ancient Jewish history, in the time of the Second Temple, we see a group called the Pharisees, and they are seen as the proto-rabbis. So there's this literature out there, and Pirkei Avot is the link between this these oral laws that expand upon the Torah, and Pirkei Avot says that these are the ethics that we are to live by in carrying out the precepts of the Torah. So, in the very second teaching, there's a quotation attributed to Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Righteous. He was one of the last members of the Great Assembly. So he was a proto-rabbi. And this was a favorite teaching of his. And I'll read the Hebrew because it may sound familiar to some people. Al shlosha devarim ha'olam omed. On three things the world stands. Okay, so you can see my video camera is standing on a tripod. If there were only two legs or one leg, it would topple over. But there's something magical about three, and that is it stabilizes it. It makes it rock solid. So on three things the world stands. The world needs these three things to sustain itself. And these are Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. The Torah is interpreted as study of the Torah, and that includes the written Torah as well as the oral Torah. Gemilut Chasadim, the third piece, is acts of loving kindness. But then you have that piece in the middle, Avodah, one of the things upon which the world stands. Is he talking about slavery in Egypt here? No. All right. Now, Shimon HaTzadik himself probably lived at the time of while the Second Temple was still up and running. But he's quoted in a work that's published well after the temple is destroyed. And so the rabbis are taking this concept of avodah, and they have to be reinterpreting it. If they're saying that the world rests on avodah, on an equal plane with Torah and Gemilut Chasadim, if they're saying that the world would fall apart without avodah, they cannot be talking about animal sacrifice here, because they don't have animal sacrifice. They have to be talking about something else. And it's here that we see that that interpretation offered by Deuteronomy, that it's that it's service of the heart, service of the soul. And the idea from Psalms, serving God with happiness. It's those verses that start to take precedence with the rabbis.